Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day you've joined us. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of A Word with Adam. I'm your host, Adam Gerrard, and joining me today is a blues legend and a member of the New York Blues Hall of Fame. He is a proud South Australian, Mr. Chris Finnen. Thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Thank you very much.
I guess I want to start with, I know that you've been playing music for over 50 years now. What was it that attracted you to the guitar the first time to actually pick it up and want to play it?
I just love the sound of it. My father used to have lots of records. I was back in England. I came to Australia in 1967 when I was 14. Mm-hmm. So Dad used to play lots of records and I was intrigued by the sound of the guitar initially. And then I was living 30 miles south of London and the Beatles and the Stones and the whole English
Yep.
pop music thing happened. And prior to that, I'd listened to Les Paul and Mary Ford and the great Django Reinhardt. We'd have Sunday lunch and Dad would get me to listen to those things. So then I picked up a guitar. I had some classical lessons at school. I didn't particularly want to play classical guitar, but there were only lessons available, and I wasn't very good at maths. And if you did classical lessons, you didn't have to do maths for that period. So
It's fair reason.
So I went and did that for about 2 or 3 lessons, but that didn't quite work out because I wasn't reading the music. I've got bad eyesight, and the guy would point to the music sheet, and I'd play what I thought was there, and I was fudging it. So he was a Spanish fellow, Mr. Babobi, and he got a little bit impatient and figured I'd be better off doing something else. So then I just used to play along with the records and ask people to show me stuff, and it sort of went from there. But I guess by the age of, that was when I was 10, by the age of about 12 or 13, I started to realise the emotional content of music, and I started to really understand what it could do for people, and I started playing at a few folk clubs, and then I was just hooked with the whole idea of music and wanted to learn from there.
So you said you moved to Australia. Was it in Australia that you had your first gig?
I did a couple of little gigs in England at school, and I did a couple of gigs in folk clubs, but when I got to Australia, I got my first electric guitar, and yes, I played in the school band for the short time I went to school here. And then I left that. I was living in Melbourne, and Melbourne had a thriving blues and R&B scene. Really, I suppose, the nucleus of what Australian rock and roll is now. Mm-hmm. And I used to go to all the clubs. I was underage, but I used to go to the clubs because I wanted to learn about music. And there weren't videos, there weren't DVDs, there weren't much in the way of music programs offering anything other than people miming to records. Mm-hmm. So the only way you could learn anything was to go and watch them. And I'd get up right close to the stage and I'd watch them, and that was how I learned. And most people were very kind and were quite helpful. If you asked them to show you things, they would. Mm-hmm. And I took that on board myself in terms of showing other people stuff.
So was it the emotional resonance of blues that attracted you to blues?
Yeah, I like the honesty of it. I mean, when I was a young kid listening to the blues, and there was obviously sexual connotations and I was a bit naive, so I didn't kind of get all that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was with slang terms. If they were talking about some woman was seeing another man, they'd have, another mule is kicking in your stall, which, because the blues at that point, before it went to the cities, before it went to places like Chicago, was from the rural South. Mm-hmm. And so they were sharecroppers and working out in the fields, and so that was relevant to their life. But I kind of liked the sound of the voice. I liked the fact that the notes were being bent and vibrato, and it wasn't too long after I got into Indian music when the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's album came out. I first heard the George Harrison song "Within You and Without You," and then got intrigued into Indian music, and I followed that calling as well and studied under Professor Junius, and we ended up playing for the Dalai Lama in 1992. Yeah. So
what was that like?
That was an absolute thrill. It was wonderful. So the Indian raga and blues have some inherent qualities in their systems that is similar. Free improvisation over a given model, and being able to vibrato notes and give the note a voice. Mm-hmm. I think with any great instrument, saxophone, guitar, all you're trying to do is emulate the human voice. That's what gives you the emotion. With words, it's easy because you can understand the words, so you know what they are. Mm-hmm. But with musical things, you've got to develop your own voice. That's the bit that takes getting a good tone or a good selection of tones, getting those notes to, if you just play one note and leave it dead, it's like mould on a pond. You've got to give it some life form. So
Absolutely.
that's an ongoing challenge, but that was the other thing I liked about it, was being able to express myself, and more importantly than that, I mean, I could sit in my bedroom and do that. It was what it did to other people. It was taking it out into places where you made people feel happy, you made them thoughtful, you made them dance, you made them reflective. I like the cause and effect. I like the idea of playing music for people and sending them home feeling different.
What would you classify as your first real gig? Like, what was the first pro gig where you had an audience who had paid to come to see you?
That would have been at one of the clubs in Melbourne. Would have been about 1968, 1969. Dorset Gardens Hotel, Thumping Tom, some of the places, the nightclubs around then.
What was it that was so addictive about those live gigs that made you go, you know what, I want to do this. I want to do this as a living. I want to record albums. I want to tour. Like, what was the...
I think initially I'd just come from England to Australia at the age of 14, so that was quite an upheaval. And Australia was a different culture than when I come from. I mean, it spoke the same language, but things were different. And I really loved the place, but I felt that music gave me a great outlet. My vision was such that I couldn't drive a vehicle, and there were things I couldn't do, so I found it hard getting a job when I left school. I just took to music like a duck to water without really thinking about my future, because at 14, 15 you don't.
No.
I just knew that I liked guitar and I liked playing, and it made me feel good, and it made me accepted by other people, and I was quite insecure as a kid. I mean, no one ever knew that, but in my own head I was. Music made me feel I had a deal of self-worth. So I found that just a good thing to do, and it made me feel really good, and then I noticed it made other people feel good, so
Yeah.
I enjoyed that, and I used to spend all my money on records. Every fortnight, every week I'd go and buy a record, so I'd continually study, because I wanted to, raise the bar and learn as much as I could. And at that time, music was just pouring out of everywhere. It was a very creative time.
Was your first album pressed on vinyl then?
No. My first album, I didn't do my first album until CDs came out.
Oh wow!
I did lots of recordings for radio stations, and I did stuff that was on cassette. But I didn't have a record company that they didn't feel what I was doing was commercial enough, and I really wasn't about to. For me, music wasn't about being commercial.
Yeah.
If it had been, I would have played the game and gone commercial with the pop songs. It was about breaking bread with my fellow human and singing about things that I felt were important. So I just felt I had to continue with that course. Of course, now you do your own albums, you can do your own covers, you can put the tracks in whatever order you want. It's changed from the need of record companies now, and I think it's a great thing. People can really manufacture something exactly the way they want to.
Absolutely. And is that one of the reasons that you didn't want to go with a record label, so that everything could be
Oh, if a record
yours?
label had said, look, Chris, we'll take you on board, here's a budget, I would have jumped at that
Of
chance,
course.
but I wouldn't have compromised my music for it.
Yep, that's fair enough. Yeah, and I guess that compromising of music, I think that's what separates, the true artists and the true legends, is that it's not just about a payday. Like,
No, I think all the people we love them for their individuality.
Exactly.
And and although I didn't have anything commercially available in the recording sense other than on cassettes, I was out there, nose to the grindstone, touring, travelling around, playing for people, and not just at venues, but I'd go to hospitals, I'd go to old people's homes, I'd go to schools, I'd go to kinders. I also saw that music had a great social value and great merit in terms of being something that was quite medicinal. I mean, if you start using the word music therapy, people will run a mile because the word therapy scares them. But in actual fact, anyone who's listening to music feels different at the end of it. That's what they're doing. They're changing the way they feel. So I could see that music was useful in far more places than just at a venue. But at a venue, you put on your glad rags and put on your show and entertain people.
Absolutely. And I'm guessing, because you played so regularly for so many years now, do you find that your music, even when you go back to the old songs, it's kind of evolved with you?
Yeah, it evolves all the time. Even if you go back a couple of years, and I've been looking at stuff because I want to release some archival music, some stuff I did years ago that didn't get released, and I go back and listen to the way I'm 68 now. Listen to the way I was playing when I was 24, and yes, it's evolved, and hopefully my sound's got better. But there were things I was doing then that I don't do now that were quite good as well. And I know I played with lots and lots of other people
Yes.
as well as doing my own music. So when you're playing with other people, then they have you on board because you've got something to offer them, but then your job is to do what they need. So I've always, in terms of if I'm playing on someone else's CD or touring with somebody else, my job is to then give them what they want. And I look at it in the same way as if you were punctuating a paragraph or a chapter in a book. You've got to put the inverted commas and semicolons and question marks and exclamation marks are all going to be in the right spot. And with improvisation, the great Sir Peter Ustinov said, improvisation is nothing more than thinking aloud. And he's very right, but of course that happens in milliseconds.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, I think the freedom music affords you for self-expression is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And I know that you've toured so many places all over the world. Where to you do you feel, where's the best place in the world to play blues?
Anywhere people want to listen. Anywhere people want to listen. If I tried to pick out somewhere that was the best place, I think that would be a prejudiced viewpoint. And it would be unfair to the people there. I think if people want to listen to it or dance to it, I mean, the whole world's dealing with this terrible COVID pandemic now, and there are a lot of negative things about that. Certainly I've done not so many gigs last year at all, but one of the positive things about it is that people that are going along to places now are not just going along to drink and party and everything else. They're going along because they purposefully want to hear that music. And they've got to make an effort to get there, and they've got to run a little bit of a risk as well as far as their health goes. And so they tend to listen more. So all of a sudden you're in a pub that was normally a pub situation, now you're in a concert situation. So you've got, it's first class. You've got this audience that are going to listen. You can maybe do a couple of quieter things. You can add more light and shade. You can give them an experience.
Like you say, it's about giving an emotion and giving an experience. So what was it like to go, like you talked about how influenced you are by Indian music, and I know Native American music also influenced you, as did Celtic music.
Yes.
What's it like to go to these places and play your adaptations of that sort of...
I think you have to look at the history of it. Certainly when I studied under Professor Juniors, and that was here in Australia, but we toured around Australia. We did a couple of albums with a group called Indian Pacific, and we were lucky enough to be invited to play for the Dalai Lama. I was awestruck, not quite the right word because I'm a grown adult, but I was certainly totally intrigued with Professor Junius' viewpoint about music. He was quite intrigued that I'd taken Indian music on board, and when we first played, he was quite intrigued that I knew a fair amount about it in terms of playing it. But then I was open to I realised also that by the same token I knew nothing about it. So I was open to what he was going to teach me. But what I discovered was that if you take something on board from another culture, you're not from there. It's not in your DNA. It's not, you're looking at it from outside the square, which in some ways is a good thing. But so you have to look at the history of it, try and understand it, and then bring something to the table that's yours, but you still have to respect it. And it's the same with blues. You know, blues comes initially from African American people, and they brought it from somewhere else. So African music comes into the fore as well. So you learn that, but then you bring something else to it as well, but not in a frivolous, self-indulgent manner. You still have to respect where it came from and give it some substance. So it's an amalgamation of all of those things, and that process sort of probably happens reasonably slowly. It's developed for me over a 50-year period, where now I can say that there's a certain amount of it I can call my own, but I certainly have to, I can't lose respect for where it came from, the fact that it's not mine, I'm borrowing it, trying to do something respectful with it and something new with it, and giving it back.
Absolutely. And so, what was it? I know you're not a braggart, but what was it like to be inducted? I mean, you've got multiple Hall of Fames you've been inducted into now, but the New York one in particular, that's a city that's known for its art, it's known for its culture, it's known for its, its artists in particular. What was it like to be inducted in amongst?
Well, it took me totally by surprise. So I was on stage playing, and they stopped me in between songs, and this fellow came out and handed me the plaque. And I'm not often stuck for words, as you can probably gather from this interview, but for once in my life, I was completely speechless. I didn't know what to say. I just thought, well, it's a bit like taking coals to Newcastle. But if they thought that my little brew of blues was worthwhile, what I was proud about was the fact that I love Australia, and so my little blend of blues had some Australianism in it, and I worked with some of Australia's greatest blues people, Matt Taylor, Phil Manning, Dutch Tilders, have been influences and friends all my life. Mm-hmm. So I was proud of that. I was proud of the fact we could take something from another culture. It's actually just what I was talking about before, and actually find a way to make it useful to our own country and to our own friends.
Now, I know that you're opening for Eric Bogle, or supporting Eric Bogle at the next CCBC concert. Yes. Have you played with Eric before?
Yes, I've opened. I've been on a couple of things with Eric, and I think they've all been charity things actually. He's a man of great substance.
Yes.
Above and beyond his music, he wouldn't suffer fools gladly, but he doesn't miss a thing. And my father was from Scotland, and my mother was from the north of England. I grew up in the south of England, so I'm quite aware of, his sharp wit, his sharp mind, and his depth of character. Mm-hmm. And I consider it. Saying it's an absolute privilege is a bit cliched, but it's going to be an absolutely wonderful day. It'll be a joy to open up for him, and it'll be a joy to sit there and listen to him play.
And I know this isn't the first time you've done a childhood cancer benefit concert before. What was it that got you involved with the corporation and supporting it like you do?
Well, my friend John Humphreys certainly, once he knew my hand was up, was quite keen for me to do as much as I could. But I'd done things like that way before I met John. I've been doing charity work, since I was 16, 17, just because I think, human beings are so important and we have to look after each other. I can remember doing a couple up at Moomba, where they fly these kids up there and who have got cancer, and you've got a whole workforce of pretty tough Australian men and women speechless, and those kids are telling their stories, and you've got blokes crying and people not knowing. It's the sledgehammer of reality. Mm-hmm. If somebody complains because they got a headache, somewhere down the street there's a woman in her 30s who's got a kid who's 5 who's got leukemia. It's just, you can't, words fail you. All you can do is your tiny little bit, and as small as it is. I remember saying to the Dalai Lama when he said, if you think you're too small to make a difference, you've never spent the night with a mosquito. And it falls into that ballpark. I think every little bit helps.
The audience that's coming to the show, what can they expect?
Well, I can't really talk for Eric, what Eric's going to play, because I don't know what his set's going to be. He'll obviously play his well-known songs for people who want that. But my set, I'll do an African piece from Cape Town, which I normally do. I'll do some blues things. I'll do a medieval Elizabethan kind of bit of improvisation. I might do an Indian rag as well. I'll mix it up.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to being there, and I hope everybody else will as well. Chris, thank you so much for this interview. We're going to cross now to Chris playing some of the music that he talked about that you'll hear at this concert. So Chris,
thank you
very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Blues with a feeling, Lord, that's what I have today. Blues with a feeling. Lord, that's what I have today. I want to find my baby. If it take me all night and day. What a lonesome feeling when you're by yourself. Lord, Lord, what a lonesome feeling when you by yourself. When the woman that you're loving, she got away with somebody else. Well, you know I love you, baby. I wanted the reason why you have to leave me all on my own to cry. Blues with a feeling. That's what I have today. Ain't it the truth? I gotta find my darling. If it take me all night and day. I'll tell you about it. Blues with a feeling. Lord, that's what I have today. Blues with a feeling. That's what I have today. Oh yeah. I want to find my baby. If it take me all night, Lord, if it take me all night and day.
This has been a Cabana production.